Good morning, Steve. We're live, brother.
Good morning, Rich. Great to see you again.
Great to see you, sir. It's been a couple weeks since Florida.
Yeah, doesn't seem that long ago, but it's been a bit.
And you live in Colorado, is that right?
Yeah, I'm on the western slope. I'm away from all the madness of that Denver metro area.
Yeah. I don't like Denver. I never have. To me, it's a flat city. I mean, it's not what you think of. When I think of Colorado, I think of like Boulder City or Dillon or, Breckenridge, some of those other real pretty towns. Denver's just a flat, big city. Might as well be LA as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, my brother used to call it LA in the sky.
He's right.
I mean, it's a mile high up there, but it's a big city. There's no doubt about it. And it's gone crazy over there.
It is, man. When I fly into that place, it's like, get me out of here as fast as we can.
Yeah, and I can't fly anywhere without going through Denver. We have a little regional airport, but everything goes to Denver. Even when I'm going west, I go to Denver first and then go west. Fortunately, the airport, I've got it all figured out. And I mean, it's a little bit crazy there too, but an hour and a half maybe is most I'm there and I'm gone. So I can tolerate that.
I'm going to go ahead and read your bio and then we'll kick it. Steve Hendricks is my guest this morning. Steve brings more than 4 decades of professional experience in use of force disciplines such as martial arts instruction, firearms rangemaster, certified defensive tactics instructor, et cetera, et cetera. He served 16 years as a certified peace officer in California and Colorado with assignments spanning patrol operations, criminal investigations, high-risk warrant service, VIP protection, training, and supervision. Steve also has 7 years of OCONUS experience as a protective security specialist conducting high-threat protective operations in support of the U.S. Department of State. An adjunct instructor at Gunside Academy since 1991, he's a certified rangemaster in pistol, carbine, shotgun, foreign weapons, and close quarters combat with extensive experience training law enforcement, military, and protective professionals. Currently, he is the lead instructor for the USCCA, United States Concealed Carry Association, and that's where I finally met Steve. I had heard of you for years and years, and it was finally really amazing to get to break bread with you and hang out with you, Steve.
Yeah, we had a great time in that class, and I can't remember if I shared this with you when we did the AAR after class, but how do I word this? You hurt my feelings, you piss me off, something. Because nobody likes the critique, right? Nobody likes to be told they didn't do well, and your frank, spot on critiques, after you give it some reflection. But I don't take those kind of things personal, so I enjoyed visiting with you, and I thought, hey, this is what's going to help me get better. And sometimes people are afraid to help you, and so I appreciate that that didn't bother you a bit.
No, I've never been troubled with that because I think you would agree with this. I think we're a lot alike in several ways, and if somebody pays me to be there, I'm going to give you everything I got. I'm not going to leave anything on the field. And you guys bringing Mike and I out. Of course, Mike works for USCCA. It's like, why am I going to backpedal? Why am I going to, I owe you that. I owe you my honesty.
I've when I'm teaching, I tell my students that you're entitled to everything I know. I'm not holding anything back. I say I can't give you everything in this short period of instruction, but it's yours. You're my student. You're entitled to everything, and hopefully, some of the hard knocks that I went through to learn some of this, we can save you. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm there to give 100% and try to do the best I can for whatever the circumstances are.
What really impressed me about you is, you would come up to me on the breaks and stuff like that. We'd chew the fat a little bit, and some of the things you're like, yeah, I think this would work, or this maybe would be more challenging to apply in a different setting, whatever. But you were always thinking, a lot of people, like when they've got as long in the tooth as you or I, I've been teaching this stuff since 1992. Hell, you were doing Rangemaster in 91. And there's a tendency to there's nothing new. I could, but you weren't that way, man. And to the credit of the group that we were with, most of those people weren't that way. They were very open and receptive, which was incredible.
It's really fun, and it's challenging, because when you see somebody that's in your group working real hard to get better, you don't want to get left behind. And so it's tough. But I took a class at Knights Armament years ago when I was working for the Department of Energy. And the instructor got up in the morning. He says, the mind is like a parachute. It has to be open to work. Now, the truth is, I have no idea what that had to do with being an armorer. I don't, but it was so profound. I didn't even have to write that down. I said, man, that just stuck with me. And so, I talk about having a big parachute fully open, trying to learn, because through my life, I've had some great wisdom that have helped me, keep that open parachute and try to learn as much as I can. And I was thinking about it yesterday. I'm running out of life before I ever learn all the things that I want to know, which is both sad and exciting. And there's that much out there. And the more I learn, the more I realize what I don't know.
No, that's a fact. And I think when we were sitting down, breaking bread over pizza or whatever it was, I was really interested, and this is kind of where I want to start today's conversation with, before, let's welcome some folks on. James is on from Massachusetts. We've got Bruce on from Michigan. Donald is on out in Texas. Says, sorry, I'm rarely here on. Well, I'm glad you are, sir. It's an AWS member. And if you want to find out if becoming a member of our self-preservation community is the right decision for you and your family, we got the training going. We'll help keep you safer if you apply it. Speaking of application, when you were working at Gunsight, you actually got to be around Colonel Cooper, didn't you?
Yeah, I was actually the last instructor that he hired before he sold the school. So he was, my first class, 250 classes, our entry-level pistol class there, he was there teaching that class. And then I went through what at the time they called a provost class. And it was not really intended as a path to become an instructor at Gunsight, but it was kind of their certification program where you would go through, spend a week, and then, you're kind of blessed to go teach the modern technique of the pistol. So I got to spend a lot of time, a little more personal with him then. And then, of course, when I came on staff, I got much more interaction with him. And he was a very interesting man. And some of the preconceived ideas about him are true, but many of them are not. And he was a fun guy, very diverse. I mean, he could speak to you on almost any topic. He loved history and the politics of the time and stuff like that. But very interesting guy, that's for sure.
Let me ask you this, Steve. What if any elements of his doctrine do you still instill in your students today? Well,
this is probably the main thing that I took away, and I heard him say it several times. The modern technique of the pistol. That's what he called it. It wasn't a Cooper technique. It was, the Weaver stance was named after Jack Weaver, and there's a huge misconception on what that is. Really irritates me. Watching people with that. But the modern technique of the pistol, the whole concept there is if something better comes along, we're going to adopt it. That's the main thing that I take. When you look physically at my stance, people will say, oh, you're shooting isosceles stance. And there's some elements when you think of isosceles, that triangle, that you could argue. But the truth is I shoot Weaver is my base. And when you break Weaver's stance down in its essence, okay, what Jack Weaver did is he put two hands on, in his case, it was a revolver is what he was shooting. He brought his sights up in line with his vision, okay, and he created a little bit of isometric tension between his hands to create recoil control. So that's the essence of what Weaver stance is. And people get caught up in the left elbow position. You see some of the photographs. And in fact, there's a quote from Colonel Cooper, and I don't remember it exactly, but basically what he said is that I wish people would quit arguing about that elbow position because it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And so really that's the main thing that I take away is if something better, then we adopt it. And pretty much I've gone away from describing my stance as Weaver or isosceles or anything like that. We describe the component. I like Mike Seeklander's description of structure, right? It's the structure of what we're building and putting together. So we don't put a name on it. And
yeah, get athletic. That's what he says.
Exactly.
Get athletic. What does that mean to you? You know?
Yeah. So that's where I go with that.
It's the whole thing. I was talking to somebody about this, like a younger shooter, maybe early 30s, and he's like, "When did the thumbs forward and all this kind of stuff?" I'm like, "Bro." And then we just started going backwards. It's like, well, this is modern stuff. It's been around for 30 years. I'm like, whoa. You go back to Rex Applegate, and I'm sure, you know, even before him. And I wonder people that saw, you know, Rex Applegate and read his books, the engineers that designed the gun and the sights on the gun were probably like, what the hell is he doing? So to your point, it kind of took Jack Weaver to, like you said, bring the sights online with your eyes. And like you said, and put tension on the gun with two hands. And who gives a crap where the elbow is?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And his simple philosophy was a slow hit is better than a fast miss.
Bingo.
And, you know, when he did that year, he in the leather slap competitions is where a lot of this stuff evolved back in the late 50s, early 60s. And when he did that, he beat everybody. And so the next year, guess what? Everybody's putting two hands on the gun. And it's interesting. There's so much of this is not new. The thumbs forward, that's not new. There's a picture of it's Carl Eldon, I think, from way back in those days with that modern grip that we think is modern is evolved out of that. He was doing it back then. So it's not as new as we like to pretend.
No, and I think, you know, some people rely too much on history, and there's combatives trainers that get really weird if you don't list your bibliography as you're going through techniques. You know, this Russian tie I learned from so and so, who learned from so and so. The student don't have time for that crap. You know, if you want to read it up, that's fine. I'm not saying I invented any of this crap. You know what I mean? But I think a healthy understanding of how we got to the technique we got, or how we got to the tool we got, is important. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And you know, it goes back to a lot of the things why I understand significantly more now why my hands are where they are and why they are doing what they do. I mean, we oversimplify it for the newer students. We say it's recoil control, right? And yes, but why does it control the recoil? And it really goes back to a lot of things. But we've been doing things for a long time without really understanding, because we didn't have the science. We didn't have some of the tools that we have now to experiment, the high-speed videography that we didn't have back then. And, you know, so we can analyze things a lot better and see what the results are when they change. So it's interesting. You know, I have a martial arts background, the Chinese, and I have a Chinese style is way older than the others. It all came from that area. And now we understand why they were doing things the way they do. Okay, we didn't know back then. They said do it. We trusted our senseis and shifus, and we did it, and it works. But now we have science to back it up. And in fact, the MMA game is a great illustration of what you said, is that it's exposed a lot of things relative to both good and bad. And competitive shooting did the same thing with I mean, that's where Colonel Cooper and all those guys started, was in his competitive shooting to learn what works. Yeah, it's, you know, solve it. And it's not, we're not all built the same. A friend of mine says we don't all wear the same size shoe. So we've got to figure out what makes it work for us.
100%. You know, going back to the UFC, I remember me and Seeklander watching that at Tommy's Training Center, this place where we were training at the time. It was Okinawan freestyle, but it was kind of a Kyokushinkai, full contact, bare knuckle stuff. And we thought we had the secret sauce. And then you watch the UFC. Like, what is he doing? Why is this guy upside down and all this stuff, you know?
Mhm.
Wait a minute, that guy just tapped. What was that? What did he do? You know, rewind that. And to
That,
where we are today. And what's funny about that is I kind of knew something was missing because I was doing judo at the time and that style. And what I used as a bouncer at night in the clubs, I wasn't full contact punching people because that would result in injuries, the club getting sued, me getting fired, you know. So it was a lot of stand up grappling, and
yeah.
then the UFC came along, and thank God for that. You know, it has really showed us some things that we thought worked kind of fell apart when you pressure tested it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's interesting. And even today I hear people, the MMA model is so popular that they kind of poo-poo so I came up doing katas and stuff like that. And they go, oh, that kata. And I go, wait a minute. It's not that you're going to use that exact technique, but it teaches you to put your combinations together, teaches you to move, teaches you balance. So it's not invalid in and of itself. It's probably not the only answer. You need to add more to it. But pressure testing.
Can I tell you something? And you tell me if I'm wrong, because you're way more. I did Ishinru as a kid, and we had the katas, and it was like we all met at Central Baptist Church, and then we all went away to do our katas, and then we'd meet up the next week. And I'm liking that. Once I learned more about Okinawa and how they, these were farmers, they were training with farm implements, and the farmers would meet at one guy's little hut and they would train, and then they'd go back to their farms and they'd work on it with their family. They'd come back. That's kind of how I think of kata, it was an ability to train away from your group and myelinate those skills and stuff like that. Is that accurate or not accurate?
Yeah. It's,
like dry practice, maybe, Steve.
well, that's a great way to describe it. It's, fighting is fluid, and it's not, I don't care whether you're a boxer, you get a jab, and then it's a combination, right? And then if you're defending yourself and you're slipping and you're parrying punches and then you're countering. So you've got to be able to put those things together. And that's what kata is. It's stringing a variety of different things together. You have to use your imagination. If you're just doing kata as the moves, I think you're missing. You have to imagine the punch, right? So that when you do the block, that there's a contact point, and your movement is about that balance, and you're shifting your weight, and that your dry practice. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's welcome some more folks onto the show. We got Tony on from Georgia. Good morning, Tony. My brother Jeff is on. Good morning, brother. Says, hope everyone is doing well. John is on from Yukon, Oklahoma. We got Donald says, I learned the Weaver in MP school back in the day. Derek is on. Tony says, a few decades ago, I referred to it as a fighting stance. That's absolutely accurate. Tony is on from Rhode Island. Dr. Fuller is on. Thank you, everyone. And go ahead and like and hit that share button. Is there a specific gun sight era lesson or drill originally credited to Colonel Cooper that you've modified in any way for today's modern CCW? And if you did change it, or you're still using it, maybe you didn't change it, maybe you're still using it, you think it's valid. Is there enlighten us on that, Steve?
Well, I have a much better understanding of what we call a controlled pair, right? And one of the terms people use all over the place, a double tap, and Colonel Cooper hated that term. It was funny, but that kind of evolved out of the competitive game that went on past him. But learning and understanding what a controlled pair is and how to apply it, it's not just blindly firing two shots. It's recognizing what the gun's doing. A lot of people would describe it now as, we do shooting at the speed of your sights. It's responsive shooting as opposed to predictive shooting. And so carrying those things over is just a better understanding of the application and how do we use them. I mean, if you're just shooting paper, you're not ever thinking about the application in real time. And then it's like many other things. It's a decent skill, but it doesn't, pressure test it. Where's it going to work at? And what's it for? One of the shooting exercises that he developed, the El Presidente, I use it now strictly as a skills assessment. I don't practice it. And that's what he developed it for. He was doing executive protection work down in South America at the time, and he needed a way to check these people and see what their current skill levels were, and he put that together. And I remember teaching with Department of Energy, and people going, "Oh, that's not tactical." And yeah, you're right. It's not meant to be tactical. That's not what it is. It's a misunderstanding of what you're trying to get out of that skill set. But as far as it goes, I mean, it's just a better understanding, really, of what he knew, and quite frankly, told us. It just didn't all connect. Because, like, when you go to a class, you're processing a lot of information, particularly if you're newer, and it can be overwhelming. And sometimes you miss little things, which is why I'm such a huge note taker now. I mean, when we stop in a group and we start talking, that notebook comes out, and I'm scribbling things down. And part of it is not so much skill based as, what can I draw and shoot the gun? Can I do this in this amount of time? It's philosophical. It's why do you do it this way? I'm doing a lot of internalizing with the ready positions now, and what they are, how we use them. As you know, you don't get to just point your gun at people without legal justification. So some of those ready positions have that appearance. And so you have to validate why you're doing that. It can't be, this is it, with no understanding of why, because there's consequences for that. And so evaluating all those things and how they apply is a big part of what I do. And I like to hear other people's philosophies on it. It makes sense sometimes, and it's challenging. I love to be challenged. Why do you do it that way? And I'll explain it, and they go, well, what about this, that, and the other thing? And I always give it consideration. And I've evolved, I guess you could say, or grown over the years, because I'm willing to look at what other people do and why they do it.
You mentioned why about 5 or 6 times in that answer, and I love that. We talk a lot about why in our firearms instructor development course, and it was, well, it's part of adult learning philosophy. Yeah, okay, but I hear all that, but it's so damn important to understand, and the student understands why we do what we're doing, and for them to really kind of buy into the technique and understand it, really take it on board. And one of the things, the day that I knew I needed to interview you, I'll tell you, and I may have told you this already, Steve. Did I tell you when it was the moment that I'm like, got to get this guy on the show? JP was coming up to you trying to mess with your foot placement when he was doing the, notional coaching. And you're like, basically, he kept, like, the third time you were almost like, get away from me, dude. I'm working on something. and JP kind of shuffled off. And not that you were in JP, you and JP, I think, are pretty tight, but it was just like, this is what I'm talking about. Here's a guy who's been doing this for 40 freaking years, and he's testing his technique and modifying it a little bit. And I was watching, like, what is he doing over there? You're a right-handed shooter with the carbine, but you were taking your right foot and pushing it a little further out, something I'd never thought to do in order to square your hips a little bit better and get better hits and faster hits. I'm like, this is what I'm talking about, man. This is somebody that could, like, what's the way we've always done it. In reality, you were like, no, I'm testing it. If I can get an edge, I'm going to change. And I love that.
Mike came up and I'm very cognitive of that, and I'm always working on maintaining that square structure because of the recoil impulse. And I describe recoil like water seeks a path of least resistance, right? And so I tell people, I say, oh, you have a leak here. You have water leaking out, recoil. And I thought I had it pretty well handled. And Mike came up and said, hey, look, you have this little tilt in your shoulders. Well, typically, if you have a tilt in your shoulders, it's because of your hips. And I kind of went, God dang, I'm A, I know I'm not supposed to do that, and B, I'm working really hard. And so I thought I've got to change something because I'm not getting it done. And that interaction with Justin was funny because, when those exercises, you assigned some of us at times to be a problem child. And so he thought I was messing with him, and I was really trying to work on something, you know. And so when he first came up, I recognized what he was doing, so I just okay, you know. But then I was trying to take advantage of being on the line, and so he thought I was messing with him on purpose. So, no, go away, leave me alone.
Oh, I loved it. I loved it because, yeah, I'm really training right now, bro. I get it. I'm not the trouble student. Go away. I'm playing with something. I'm using these rounds and getting value out of every shot. I love that, man. So another thing you said that I really want to key in on, you said something like, and I may butcher it, Steve, and I apologize, shoot to the speed of your sights. And I think that's what you said. Seek Leonard has something similar, and that is, you know, your sights are your speedometer.
Yeah.
And I think that goes over the head of most new shooters. I don't think they understand it. So can you please break this down to those people that may be new to shooting?
Yeah. So, you know, and I'll tie it to something that Colonel Cooper said. He says the only way to ensure a hit is to use your sights. Now, that is not super descriptive because there's lots of ways to use your sights. Okay, but that's, you know, if you want to be sure you're going to hit the target or the portion of the target that you intend to hit, you got to use your sights. And so your ability to recognize what the gun is doing, is it coming back on target, is really based on the simplest ways, based on the sight or the dot if you're using a dot. And so you can't do things. I mean, you can press a trigger faster than what you can manage your visual acuity on what the sight is doing. And a big portion of that comes from the reason behind that process is the brain's ability to process what your eye sees. And you know, part of my early emphasis when we're getting students to learn those things is I say, give your brain a chance to process what your eye sees. And the more that happens, that's that myelination, like we myelinate that muscle memory, right? But your brain myelinates recognition as well. And so pretty soon your ability, the speed at which you shoot your sights will get faster and faster because your brain recognizes it sooner. So when we're shooting at the speed of our sights, it's a moment of confirmation that the gun is where you want it before you press the trigger. And the emphasis on that really is in defensive context, not competitive. Like I will shoot at the speed of my trigger in a competition all the time. But you have to process, the first thing I tell people in defensive context is every shot, that the question that has to be answered, is this legal and justifiable before you press the trigger on every single shot. And so there's a lot of information that you have to process to come up with that answer. And so if you're shooting at the speed of your trigger, I mean, I watch these great guys, Robbie Latham, Mike, when they're really on, and they're shooting splits that are, you know, 1700ths of a second, 1600ths of a second. Well, the truth is your brain can't process much information in that amount of time. And so in a defensive context, if you're trying to shoot at that speed, you could be firing shots that are not legally justifiable. So you have to process information. And there's nothing wrong with having the skill to shoot 1500 splits with accurate shots. In fact, I think we should all have that skill. But we don't necessarily apply it that way in a defensive context. So when we're shooting at the speed of our sights, we're processing information, more information than when we're shooting at the speed of our trigger.
Yeah, outstanding answer. And the answer to everything is always, it depends. I mean, that's really the answer. So, you know, because context is king. You know, so what's contextually, what are we talking about? And I think so. I love the fact that you put this in the spot that it needs to, and that's context. And speaking of that, one of the things that I think for new shooters is to understand when you talk about the sights, like the drill. I love it. You know, it's at the 5-yard line or whatever, and you have them misalign their sights on purpose.
Yeah.
Fire that shot, misalign all the way to the right, fire that shot, misalign, take the red dot and put it just above, just below. And you see that like in an IDPA target, they're all still in the zero down.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? You don't need a perfect sight picture. You need a sight picture that's good enough at that distance to get that hit. And I say all that because, like, for me, the Dawson sights I run is about as wide a notch as they make, and they're about as thin as front sight fiber optic as they make, because I want a lot of slop in those sights.
Yeah, a lot of
You know
light.
what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it. So Sean Alcazar, one of our regional training managers, has switched his handgun.
Oh yeah, I know Sean. Yeah.
So he, I was on the phone with him, and he just put some new sights on, and he told me the width of the front sight, and I went, dude. He goes, oh no, this rear notch is really big, and I'm going, man, that's a pretty wide front sight. So he went to the range, and he it was terrible.
Yeah.
He got the gun up there, and so he switched. And for my competitive guns, I shoot very narrow, but I don't need much. And if you're going to shoot something with a tritium or something, it has to be a little bit wider to fit that tritium capsule in there. But it's amazing when I learned that to go with a narrow front sight, how much more speed you pick up. Everything in life's a trade-off, right? And so
yes,
if your gun is set up to go faster, you're probably sacrificing some precision. And when you look at it, technically that's true, but are you sacrificing so much precision that it's detrimental? Generally not. I mean, how precise do you have to be with a handgun, particularly at self-defense distances? So yeah, I like to be able to see, and that's that narrow front sight and that big notch in the back, look through that thing. But I wanted to elaborate on something you said, made me think about it, when we misaligning the sights and stuff. When we learn our pistol presentation, when you learn to grip the gun consistently in the holster and bring that gun out, when you present it in front of you, you should be looking through the rear sight without any trouble. And if that's the case, then it's just a matter of, like you said it, recognizing, is the alignment good enough for what I need at the time? But so many of the new shooters, when they bring the gun up, none of that is even close to being aligned, because there's no consistency with the hand placement while the gun is still in the holster, so that when they come up, they can myelinate, that muscle memory. But now when my gun comes up, I'm already looking through that rear sight. It's just there. And so I can recognize sight's a little high, not too much though. It's good to go. The real transition for me was that dot. And I've got to where I can run it okay now, nowhere near what I think I need to be at. But that was, I just stubbornly refused to switch,
I don't run one either. And I'm going to say something, probably people are going to throw cabbage at me or whatever, and that's fine. In a lot of ways, it's a solution in search of a problem. What problem are we trying to solve that a handgun and iron sights have not been able to fix at gunfighting ranges? Now, when Seymour Optics first came out in the early 80s, I guess it was, and Brian and Robbie and all those guys are early adopted it, that's fantastic. And that's great. But I still think at handgun ranges, defensive context, iron sights will get the job done. That's my opinion.
I agree 100%. And I'll be quite honest with you. The only reason I've picked up the dot is because I have so many students, and I have to be able to speak intelligently about training them to be effective with the dot. And I couldn't answer some of the questions. I remember the first student that called me, this is years ago. I wasn't even close to thinking about a dot. And he says, yeah, I put it on. He's got questions on it. So I'm kind of guessing. I said, well, look, here's what I think. But I didn't feel that was a sufficient answer. I mean, he's reaching out to me for a reason. So I had to get some dots and stuff. But the new live fire skills test that we're in the process of refining, I've been running it with my dot in the low 20s. And then I went out the other day and ran it with my iron sights in 16. So I was 4 seconds faster with my iron sights than I was with my dot. Yeah,
I got a copy of it right here. Yeah, I've been running it too, and I don't know if it's ready to be put out on the street, so I haven't really said anything about it. I've been running some of the guys I trained through it, and I've been feeding that data to Mike, and I'll share it with you too, Steve, so you can see what kind of numbers we've been getting out of it. I like it. I think it's
Some
great,
requests from
great little test.
some of my instructors. They want to do the same thing, and they want to run some of their people through it. I keep forgetting to ask Mike, but we need the data, so I think we're going to push it out to a few people to test that stuff. But I'm pretty happy with it. I think right now what we need is this a scale, right? Where are we going to be? What is the times that we're looking for?
Yeah, because here's the thing, man, and I talked to Mike about this too. If all we do is have high-end people run this thing, and I don't mean high-end people, but people that can shoot fairly well, we might get a scale that the average CCW guy or gal is like, I can't, what is this? So I don't know what right looks like, but I love this test. I think it's fantastic.
Well, the simple way I think for us to do it is much the way they do in IDPA or USPSA is you figure out what 100% is. What's the top, right? And then it's a math problem after that, right? So the 90%, 80%, and then the difficulty becomes is picking the percentage level that you want, right? So we think instructors should be at this level, and those kind of things. But we did that with our defensive pistol program and working on the scale. And one of the things that I told everybody, I said, we can't set this scale based on us. We have the opportunity. We put a lot more work in than the average person, and if we try to expect that of everybody, it's going to be in many cases out of reach. So the difficult question is, how do we gauge that? And we're running the assessment in our training tour classes right now with no real scale, just to see how people do to help set that standard. What is the actual end user that's coming to train with us? What is their, after a couple of days training, what is their percentage level or efficiency level with that?
And you are collecting that data, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we've only had a couple classes, so we really don't have much in the way of data, but which is why I want to push it out to a couple of my training counselors, because they're running end user classes and they can get some of that same kind of data that we're looking for.
And a lot of it too is how you present it. When I ran it the first time, I'll send you the data and you'll be like, you run it so slow, because Mike said, I said, what's the times? When he set me up at the 15-yard line, where it goes, times are completely irrelevant. Just got to get your hits. I'm like, okay. So I took forever, to get a clean run through the whole thing. He's like, I'm really, really shocked you were that slow. I'm like, you told me times are relevant. You've been recording times the whole time, Okay, I need to run this thing again, bro. You need to tell me what tell me what time's relevant. All right, let's do it again.
Well, Steve Fisher asked me that question the other day. He says, what times should I be looking at for each string, right? And I said, well, first it's about getting hits. Only hits count, right? And I said, so you run it comfortable, make sure you got all your hits, and then click it up a notch, right? It's okay to drop a couple out, just don't drop a lot out. So you want to push where you start to, for lack of better terms, fail. I don't consider it failure, but where you start to drop a point or two. And then you ask yourself, all right, why did I drop those? Speed is rarely the problem.
All right.
It's just not. I tend to, people use speed up, slow down as the answer when it's not the answer. And so why did it drop? So you get to that point where you're dropping a couple points, and then that's kind of your target right there. And then of course you're always trying to shave time. First, when you drop a couple, then you don't slow down, as the saying goes. Right where you're doing to drop the points. When you get those points back, then push a little bit again until you drop a couple more. We had a lot of fun. Justin and I went out and spent a couple days with Mike in Oklahoma, and he's so fun to shoot with, and he can make you feel little, not with his comments, just watching him perform, trying to keep up with him.
Right.
Very talented. So it's a great drive to watch somebody like that and say, okay, it's possible. And so we go.
You mentioned something. Oh yeah, the idea of I'll be coaching somebody like, what do you think you need to do? Because I always like to help them self-evaluate. I think I need to slow down. Like, what's slowing down going to get you? I mean, really, but I think the new shooter thinks, yeah, but if I just slow down, no, if you're still moving the gun,
right.
slowing down ain't going to do jack.
Well, and the way I describe it to people is that if speed were the problem, and I use Mike and Robbie Latham and Todd Jarrett and Jerry Barnhart and some of the guys, I said those guys wouldn't be able to do what they do because they're really fast, right? So speed is not the problem here. The problem is technique. And the easiest thing for me to do is add speed if you have good technique. But if your technique is not good, adding speed, the way I describe it is speed exposes your flaws, right? When you add speed and you have a flaw, you're going to see it. It magnifies it. And so you have to have the appropriate amount of speed for the skill set that you have if you want to be effective, whether we're talking defensive shooting or competitive shooting. When you add more speed than your skill set can handle, you can relate it to vehicles, right? So it can either
combatives, everything.
Yeah, right. So that has to be that balance. It's a simple analogy we've talked about for years. Your balance of speed and accuracy is what that all implies. It's what it all means.
Yeah. Gal says, good morning, guys, from the hot weather of Manila. Hope you're doing well over there in the Philippines. Alan is on. This is from Triple Occupied, Virginia, teaching an armed security officer class. We'll watch the replay. Glad to see you there. Tony says, hey, there's a lot to be said for suppressive fire. Simple fire, brother. Brian is on from North Texas. Bruce is on. Says speed on target versus shots on target. How does that scale? Qualifications versus proficiency. And outside of perhaps outside of Colonel Cooper's influence, what one underrated training principle do you believe produces the biggest real world survivability gains for ordinary armed Americans? And while you're thinking of that, I want to, for those that are just joining us, I'm speaking to Steve Hendricks. He is the lead live fire instructor over at United States Concealed Carry Association, and 40 years of doing this professionally. So what are your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, it's a combination of skills training and then contextual training. And that's that pressure testing that you're talking about, right? So Justin says, you don't learn to box by getting in the ring with Mike Tyson, right? You go take some boxing lessons first. So you figure out what skills you need. You train to probability, not possibility. What's the most probable thing? And you start with that. And then you pressure test it. I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of competitive shooting because it's stressful. It's the only thing it doesn't apply to a real fight is the mindset aspect of it. You're not afraid for your life, but the amount of stress it puts on and the way it tests your skills, whether it's your gun handling, your marksmanship, there's no better way to do that than a good competition. And I'm super competitive, so getting out there and doing that. But it is said so many ways, but a long time ago, I stopped using the description of beginner, intermediate, advanced as far as my classes. You're coming to take a beginner class, and there's a variety of reasons. But what I describe is the problems are advanced, beginner, intermediate, not the skills. It's this exact same skill set that you would use in any problem. It's just how difficult is the problem in front of you, right? Is it in a defensive situation? Is it one person? Is it two? That's a more difficult problem, right? But it's the same skill sets. So we have to have the proper mindset when it comes to these things. Nobody likes to practice the basics, but it's all basic. It's just how it's applied. There's an old saying that I forget the category, or amateurs practice until they can do it right. Professionals practice until they can't do it wrong. And that's just that consistency, that myelination, that, gosh, there's so many great sayings. I don't make any of these up. Rangemaster at Gunsight, he said, gunfighting is a thinking man's game. And it's true. There's a lot going on that your brain has to process. And so some of the things like presenting the gun from the holster, gripping the gun, we don't want to think about those. We want our mind clear to think about the tactics, de-escalation, whatever the case may be. And so when you don't have to think about those things, you've practiced them to the point that they're not going to fail under whatever pressure test you put them under, then we've reached a point where they're effective for us in a real world situation. Did that answer your question, Rich?
No, it's perfect, Steve. Thank you. And Jim Cirillo, who'd been in more gunfights than probably just about any American in the late 20th century. This guy said, when the timer came on at a match, my hands would shake, and he said they never shook in a real gunfight, and I think that's very telling.
Yeah. Well, it's. I don't know if there's such thing as stress inoculation, right? I mean, do you really get used to it? I remember a pursuit. We were chasing this guy. He tried to run over one of our officers, and we got called off the pursuit and other agency, and so we pulled over and got out. And I'm at the time when I got out of the car, I'm vibrating from head to toe in the car. I'm so focused on driving, trying to box this guy in and stuff like that. But the adrenaline didn't all of a sudden start when I got out of the car. I mean, it was going on there, but my mind was just focused on the task, and I didn't realize all the effects that it was having on my body. But they're there, they're real. And I've been in lots of stressful situations, but I'm still standing there vibrating from head to toe, right? So, do we really get used to that? I think what happens honestly is that your mind becomes clearer in those situations, right? Because so much of what we do is automated that now your brain starts working a little better. And the truth is that when you get through those and you realize, hey, I made it, I'm okay, then you stress less over those risky situations. I mean, you think about all the crazy things we did of kids jumping off bridges and stuff. We didn't give it much thought before we did it. And I look at it now and go, no, I wouldn't do it now.
No, I wouldn't do it now.
So,
but yeah, I like my first night or two working in nightclubs as a 20-something-year-old guy. The things seem to happen really fast. You know what I mean? It's like, and then the longer I did it, the longer I worked there, it seemed like I just had an abundance of time, Yeah. And where I would get adrenalized in the moment, now the adrenal dump would come after the patron was taken out of the club, and we were kind of talking like, did you go here? Did he do that? But anyway.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you mentioned at the very beginning, our similarities were alike. I in my 20s, I worked as a bouncer in a cowboy bar, and after a while, all the things that I perceive going on, at first it's just you and this person, but after you've done those a while, you see what else is going on around you. You have an awareness of other people coming up behind you and stuff like that. And it's your ability to function more efficiently and effectively because that awareness of other things starts coming with you. But
that's that, and you get so target focused. You can't open your aperture, and I think if anything, that's where that stress inoculation, whatever we want to call it, helps you with exactly what you just said, Steve. That suddenly I'm aware of what's going on around me. I can focus on other things and not become overwhelmed by what's in front of me.
Yeah.
Which leads me into my next question. Go ahead.
Having confidence in what you're doing, knowing it's going to work, trusting it. If you're hesitant, you're thinking about, hey, I should be doing this. Is it going to work and stuff like that? Then that's just adding to the problem. So,
well, Mike's company tagline, Shooting Performance's tagline, is and has always been trust your training. Yeah. Now, if you don't have any training, you got nothing to trust, and I think that's his point. You can only trust what you put in. And if nothing went in, then guess what? When you need it, nothing's going to come out. And that's just as simple as that. I think there's all red-blooded American men think they can do three things really good, better than any other man. Make love to a woman, shoot a gun, and fight. And 99% of men are absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
If that's not your profession,
Yeah.
then good luck.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. And it takes, it's ongoing. Diminishing skills, right? I tell people all the time, I can still ride a bicycle. I can get on a bicycle today and ride it across town, but I don't do, or wouldn't even attempt to do on a bicycle what I did when I was a young teenager, and that was my only mode of transportation: hopping curves, popping wheelies, doing all that kind of stuff. Those skills have diminished, and so while I can still ride a bicycle, I'm not as proficient. So when you start talking defensive skills, and I think everybody should start with hand to hand, for lack of better terms, right? Because you're far more likely to be in need of that than you are your firearm. And my whole career as law enforcement, executive protection, high risk, the amount of times I needed a gun compared to the amount of times I needed my hands is not even close. And then even before that are some great verbal judo, some good de-escalation skills. It's paid off for me. Geez, I couldn't even begin to tell you. But if you don't have a whole package, well, it's that old saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so they go out and they get some firearms training. In some cases, some really good firearms training, but they have no other skills to back up. And so they want to solve it with the gun when that's not potentially the best choice.
I 100% agree with you. Absolutely. I think that, yes, starting in combatives and then, working into an entangled position with, armed entanglement, and then go from there. And that's what I normally like when somebody joins the American Warrior Society. They can get a one-on-one onboarding session with me over the phone. And I will normally direct them to the training vault where we talk about, I know that you got a CCW, right? Oh yeah, Rich, I got it here in Idaho or wherever. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Do you know how to maintain custody of your firearm in entanglement? And the answer is no. Don't even know what you're talking about. Okay, great.
Right. What is that?
What is that? Right. We have a module for that, and you can get a blue gun and work with your husband or your whomever, your son, and you can play with those techniques to keep you safe. Because if you don't know how to maintain custody of the gun, you might just be a holster for somebody else's gun.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks for taking care of my gun for me.
I appreciate that. Now I'll take that back.
Yeah.
Which is another thing. A lot of instructors teach shooting and tactics separately. Is there one training design change that you'd make so that a typical CCW class produces better decision making under real stress?
Yeah, everything boils down to time, resources. And I've had this discussion many times with instructors on classes. Hey, we're going to teach this, and I go, well, do we really want to teach that here? And there's huge debate. It's all time dependent, and I think that in a perfect world, it is. All of them, all CCW classes will have blocks that deal with that. It's where do you fit it? It goes back to what we were talking about right before the show started. Is where do you find the time to do all these things? I have the luxury of this is my profession, and I've been in professions for a long time now that I couldn't afford to not pay attention to this stuff. As a police officer, I had to know how to keep my gun. In fact, one of my very first arrests ever was a fight over my gun. And so fortunately for me, that case worked out well, but it was early in my career. And so it emphasized, hey, this can happen. And it's important that you have those skills. And so getting people to commit the time to these different pieces. I mean, you don't have to do it all at once, but it has to happen over a long period of time. And they don't know that if you don't get an opportunity to show them. So it'd be great to have them long enough to show some of that, integrate, and then be even better if that they recognize at that point that they need to continue to train and get more lessons. Our big Rich is in the firearms industry is not mirroring closer the martial arts model of ongoing training, right? It's a lot of one and dones, particularly concealed carry classes. And it's a bit of a disservice, but I don't know the solution. we've been trying to figure that out for a long time. You know.
Well, the solution used to be, if you go back to our founding, you learned from your grandfather and your father and so on, and you took this rifle into the woods, and your family didn't eat if you weren't good at it, so there was a freaking direct incentive to do that. Whereas today, that kind of generational knowledge is not passed.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, there's the anti-hunting groups out there, and I hunt. I love to hunt. My passion is upland birds, and we eat the game we take. I don't do it to feed my family. I don't need to do that. We got grocery stores like everybody else, but there's plenty of enjoyment in being out in the field, even if we don't see game. I never count that as a wasted day or a wasted opportunity. We haven't taught our youngsters to enjoy what God gave us, and there's a variety of things. I read a meme the other day about changing a flat tire, and it's a young woman on the phone to her dad asking for help, and he said, "Well, isn't your boyfriend with you?" "Yeah, he doesn't know how to do it." And dad says, "First thing, get rid of him." So
that's a great point.
Can't change a tire, but that's not uncommon that those things are not getting done.
No, they're not. So like you said, we have the one and done model sucks, with CCW. Now, I'm also very scared of the government mandating levels of training. That scares the crap out of me. I think when an organization like you guys are in a perfect position to say, while the government isn't mandating it, you as a responsible gun owner need to get this training, and we're going to make it as accessible to you as possible and package it in a way that is user friendly, and we're going to cut through a lot of the fluff and just give you the stuff that you're going to need to keep you and your family safer. And that's why I really proud to be working with you guys, and I look forward to what you guys are doing. I think the United States Concealed Carry Association is going to be leading that fight for the years to come. From what I've seen of you guys, my hat's off to you, man.
Well, I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in what we did. I've never done that. Years ago, I had a gun manufacturer come up and say, "Hey, we want you to shoot our gun competitively." And I go, "Okay, send me one and I'll work it out and I'll let you know." And he couldn't believe I didn't just automatically accept a gun. And no, before I endorse support, I've got to know and believe. And we're doing great things, and we have a real interest in providing what people need, right? And long-term, all the different things, and we're going to expand some great stuff. Mike's great leader for us. It's been quite a shift for me having him. He's really hands off. "Steve, go get this done," and of course he expects me to take care of that, and I work real hard to not disappoint him. But he's got some really great ideas, and he trusts me relative to my ideas, and so we collaborate pretty well. And I'm looking forward to where it's exciting right now. I'm really excited at work, where we're going, what we're doing.
Yes, and this is where can I run 5 miles as fast as I could when I was in the Marines? Of course not. But I think the accumulation of skills and things that you and I have seen throughout our careers that uniquely position us to help in these things, because some people, they just don't know what they don't know, and some of the crap that's being sold to them out there is not important. Like you, with the American Warrior Show, if somebody's like, hey, reaches out, hey, I'd love for you to talk about our product, and I'm willing to pay you X amount of dollars a year. That's fantastic. Send me the product. I'm going to play with it, break it, use it. And a lot of times I have to go back and go, I'm so sorry, we've done that probably about 50% of the time. It's just not going to be a good fit at any price.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, there's a variety of interesting aspects of that. I talked to one of our training counselors, very dear friend of mine. I promise you're going to get to meet him at the instructor symposium. He's coming out to present as well, but he, very unique individual, and he was recently he's all in with USCCA. I mean, he's certified instructor, but he was recently contacted by one of our competitors asking him to come build curriculum and stuff for him. And I'm sure he was very polite. He's a very polite gentleman, but he declined. He says, no, I'm supporting what USCCA is doing, and thank you, but no thank you, and that I'm grateful, because he's a huge asset for us, which is why I recruited him early on, his background and everything. But those are the kind of individuals that we're using to support what we're doing. They're tons and tons of experience, and that's what it's going to take to keep us leading the pack.
100%.
Meet some of these guys. Rich, you're who? Randy, another friend of mine, retired Marine, Light Colonel, who's one of our training counselors, and all of these guys will. I don't know if they'll all be at the instructor symposium, but some of them will. And over time, I'm sure we'll get an opportunity. But it's just another great group of folks. And I tell people all the time, I'm not particularly exciting, interesting, or anything, but I know a lot of really cool guys.
Same. Same. Yeah, I've stood on the shoulder of giants my entire life. And
they make me look good.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I've known some of the finest Americans. Some of them gave their life in service to this nation, and I think especially at this age, where I'm cozy and sleeping under a blanket of freedom that I'm not providing anymore. It's a gift that other young men and women are out there providing for us. Tell me, where do you see concealed carry in America heading in the next 5 years, or even the next election cycle? And the reason I ask this is because I had Alan Kelly on Monday. Alan spent 40 years in law enforcement, 35 as a Virginia State Police, and he enumerated all the things that are going on in Virginia, all the changes that they're ramming down their throats, and every damn one of them are unconstitutional. Let's get that out of the way. Every single law they're trying to push is a direct violation. And when you and I were police officers, if we violated someone's constitutional rights, we're going to prison. And yet these lawmakers somehow have immunity to pass these unconstitutional laws that violate our rights. And all they got to do is like, hey, take us to court. We'll go all the way to the Supreme Court. We got unlimited resources. So how do we, as a gun community, looking forward, Steve, what does it look like in the future of CCW? Are we going to continue to see more states fight us like Virginia is? What are your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, they're going to get more clever. Colorado's a great example. So we have our governor and legislature doing the same thing, and they're trying to make it so that people just won't do it, because it's the hurdles they have to go over and the things they have to do are too difficult or too demanding. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And it's such an odd thing. I'm watching the headlines and stuff, and some places are solidifying things, making it better, and then there's other places that are ramping up their attacks. I think it's going to continue to be a struggle for a long time. Some of these more liberal states, there's no indication that mindset is going to change anytime soon. So as long as they have that control in their legislatures and stuff like that, they're going to continue to push, and they're going to get more clever. In Colorado, it's not an assault weapons ban. They call it, forgive me, I can't remember. It's a specialized semi-automatic weapon or something like that. And they're not banning them, but you personally, if you want to own one, have to be registered, right? So you can have it, but you have to go through training. You have to jump through all these hoops and then you have to be licensed to own one. So they're not banning. That's very clever tactic. And I think that we're going to see people do that. Of course, I think they simply learned from all the other assault weapons bans across the country that were failing in the courts. And so now they can't say you can't accuse them of banning them, because they're not. You can have one if you go through all this process, get yourself certified and registered and all that kind of stuff. So I think the attacks on our specifically our Second Amendment liberties are going to get more creative. And then to your point, I'm not exactly sure. Somebody's going to have to step up and say, hey, look, the Supreme Court said this, right? And you're not adhering or applying to that, and here's the consequences. But nobody's applying, like you said, the consequences that would affect you and I for violation of the Constitution to these smaller government entities, states and municipalities and stuff like that. So until there are consequences for that, they're not going to stop doing it.
No, they're not. And there needs to be consequences. There needs to be, because I don't know. I don't understand, even if you say, well, we had qualified immunity, and some states have even taken that away for law enforcement. Tennessee, they just passed a bill, and it goes before the governor, I think today, extending where you can use, like the cartilage around the house. Now we're going to expand that a little bit more here in Tennessee and make it even more easy for you to use deadly defensive force in protection of your property. And Tennessee is one of those states that's leading the charge in the other direction. Praise God, that we live here, but that's not the case for everywhere. And I don't like, when I hear someone on the other side of the aisle, a leftist, a liberal, what have you, a Democrat, say assault weapon, I make them, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, come on, Rich. Sure you do. I'm like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. Explain yourself.
Yeah.
It falls apart. They don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we, in many cases, allow them to set the verbiage, and they do that very intentionally. The words they pick to describe things are not accidental, and they're inculcating people to think this way. And so I'm with you. I don't. So like gun violence, there's no such thing as gun violence.
What are you talking about? Yeah, exactly.
What is gun violence, right? I mean, a friend of mine was a manager at a gun store, and they did this thing where they had a news guy, and they set a loaded handgun on the counter, and they just left it there and went about business. And the news guy was there, and every half hour he'd come back and say, yeah, gun hadn't attacked anybody yet, Mm-hmm. So that terminology, we have to be disciplined enough to say there's no such thing as gun violence. Okay, there's plenty of violence and violence where guns were used, but it's not gun violence. Nobody called it knife violence recently when that guy stabbed and killed all those people. What knife violence?
What about rented truck violence? These people that are renting trucks and running through crowds, is that
truck violence? Right. So once again, it's intentional because it creates a problem with that tool, right, as opposed to the individual.
I've mentioned it on here before, but since we're discussing it, you probably haven't heard this. Mike and I were out at a friend's house, very wealthy. They served us dinner. It was beautiful, lovely. And then the wife took us in. So, can I talk to y'all in the other room? Sure. And we go in the other room, and she puts on YouTube some 2-minute video about assault rifles. I'm using air quotes if you're listening to the podcast to come. And Mike and I are kind of looking at each other like, where is she going with this? Because I think we were there training the SWAT team for that county. And so it ends in, she goes, now tell me, gentlemen, why would anybody need that? And I'm like, well, first of all, I don't need to give you a need to justify a right, number one. But number two, what percentage of people do you think how many people do you think are killed with rifles? Let's just the broad category. Forget assault rifles. Well, I'll lump in every single rifle death in the United States. It's like 252, something like that on average. It's a tiny cohort, and even the amount of gun deaths per year. If you take out suicides, the number is diminishingly small.
Significant,
right? It's significantly small. And then you have to take out the justified homicides with a firearm, and then the number shrinks even smaller. So I say all that to say this woman who was a healthcare provider, I said, what's the third leading cause of death in this country? I already told you rifles killed, and you can look it up, about 250 Americans every year. How many do healthcare providers kill? And she smiled and said, you know what I'm going with this. It's the third leading cause of death. I don't say scalpel violence when one of your cohort kills a father of 3 accidentally. There's roughly 250,000 Americans are killed via medical error. Nobody's trying to get rid of you. Okay. But again, we have to be, just like we have to think with a handgun in our hand in offensive shooting, we have to think too, as armed Americans, how do we push back against this stupidity? What are your thoughts, Steve? How the hell do we do it?
One of my big pet peeves is the provocateur who wants to sling his rifle or shotgun and go to Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And here's the analogy I give. So imagine that you have a person that is, for lack of better terms, they're not pro-gun, but they're not, they're just kind of ambivalent about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until they see you at Walmart. And they think that is so bad that now they're actually going to start contributing. They're going to start being proactive against guns. So what are we really doing when we do that? I mean, I'm a huge fan of concealed carry,
Mm-hmm.
right? We know there's people out there that don't like guns for a variety of reasons. So why are we agitating them unnecessarily? Why are we creating proactive people when we, instead of having an opportunity to have a discussion with them and help them understand, we're provoking them? I don't think that does us any good at all. So I mean, yeah, there's certain events where hey, we're going to have this rally, we're all going to wear our guns, and but to intentionally poke the bear, I think is fairly short-sighted. And so,
Yeah, I've never understood that logic either. It's just like the First Amendment audit people that are on there filming cops doing stuff. Like you're just being an asshole.
yeah,
You're not helping anything.
no.
And I'm not saying people that carry rifles into Walmart are being assholes, but I think there's other ways to get your point across. Now, here's where I'm going with that. When it comes to the firearms, you said some people just don't like guns. Well, when they call a cop at 2 a.m, they pray to God that he shows up with a gun.
Yeah.
So when I have that conversation, when your door's being kicked in, do you hope that cop shows up with a bouquet of roses or a firearm? Well, obviously, Rich, a firearm. Okay, so your problem isn't with a gun. I agree with you. Guns can be the solution, right?
That analogy.
So we have to have these conversations now where the left's logic seems to fall apart to me, and I'm not a leftist, so I'm just trying to understand how these people think, is only police officers should have guns. Steve and Rich, you guys shouldn't have guns. You're not cops anymore. Okay, great. But didn't you just say that cops are evil and racist?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, they are, but only they should have guns. Their logic just falls apart, right?
Well, in many cases, right? So we had to defund the police thing. And the whole reason they did that is because the police were not adequately knowledgeable and skilled. So we're going to take the money away from them. Well, that's terrible. What you should be doing is, hey, we need to give them more money, make them more knowledgeable and more skilled, because that's my complaint, is that they're not good enough. Well, taking their funding away for training and stuff like that is not solving the problem. It's the exact opposite, right? So you make them better. It's more training, better training. I don't know if the word logic applies, right?
It's like BLM. They wanted body cameras. We gave them body cameras. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
And we adopted it. And guess what we're finding?
Yeah.
That
when body cameras were new, I had a complaint against me as a police officer, and I go, you know what? I want the next camera, right? Because most of the departments are, and ours included, was not a lot of funding, so we were rolling them in a little at a time. We couldn't afford to do it all at once. But I demanded the next camera. I said, if I'd have a camera, we wouldn't have this conversation. Okay,
That's right.
because this guy's making it up. So I asked for the next camera installation and microphone and stuff like that. I've been a fan of them since they started rolling them out. And of course, it's light years ahead of what we had available to us. But yeah,
My brother's comment is, and Jeff and I both just retired Leo. My brother, he says, that's why Leos need to start in corrections. I think that's, he and I did. And I think that's a fantastic place. You know why? Because you're on camera at all times. In that facility, you're on camera at all, and an inmate accuses you of something. What's the tell of the tape say? And then so that when you go onto the street, number one, you realize you can't shoot everybody. You can't punch everybody. You can't fight everybody. You're going to have to use what's between your ears and what's God gave you below your nose, right? To have these conversations with people. And then you're going to develop relationships, believe it or not, with some of these scumbags out back on the street. You're going to know Pookie and Ray, and you know his cousin, little Steve, and all this kind of stuff. And this is going to help you in the long term. If you have a good reputation that you made in corrections, it's going to work to your favor when you get on the road. And I think it's the way it should be if it was me making decisions.
Yeah. The fact that I had cameras saved me on many occasions, right? Because of what's going on. And so
it never hurt me. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's, the technology is, like I said, is way better. We didn't have on person. We just had car cameras at the time, but the audio was on person. So, but fortunately, a significant portion of what we do is in front of the car stops and stuff like that. So it picks up the video as well as the audio, but it's, the majority of it's like any segment, law enforcement has some bad apples, right? And this will help weed that out. But the majority of them are good, hardworking guys trying to do the right thing. And with the limited amount of training that they get, and I'm here to tell you, they don't generally get a lot. So it's not. Well, I saw something the other day. Hey, go apply, get a job. If you don't like the way you're doing it, go give it a try. It's not as simple as a lot of people think. I've had plenty of my friends say, I couldn't do it, Steve. I couldn't do what you do, and I don't argue with them. I think that many of them probably could, but they hear some of the stories and stuff, and they wonder how we stand there and take that kind of abuse. And it's a necessary part of what we do. We have to manage that.
Can you imagine the respect Colin Kaepernick would have gotten for his stance had he have been like, you know what, this is how I feel. I'm going to go be a reserve deputy. I'm sure they would have open arms. Absolutely, Mr. Kaepernick, come on in, sir. Here's your uniform. You're going to be riding with Steve today. Steve is going to be your FTO. And, give us 8 hours a month. And I guarantee you, he would have had a whole different perspective. And if he still wanted to kneel after working the beat for 6 months, 1 week in a month kind of thing, okay, great, brother.
He's making decisions based on a lack of information and stuff. But there's I don't want to drive too far down that. But yeah, I agree. And we had ride along programs, and we get people out in citizens academies and things for educating the public, and those are all beneficial. I think if a person wants more information about their particular agency, whether it's police department or sheriff's department, they are generally more than happy to provide that and provide you an opportunity to ride along and see exactly what a night shift looks like. And I would encourage people to do that.
Yeah. I think this might be a good point to end on. I've kept you on here for about an hour and 20 minutes. Use of force never looks good, whether it's a concealed carrier, a soccer mom that is, being attacked in a Kroger parking lot. When she uses whatever defensive tool she has on her person to thwart that attack, it's not going to look good. Never looks good. So, and that's part of the problem I think that we as armed Americans face. If I have to use my tool, or you do, Steve, or when you did use force professionally, whether it's overseas or here in the U.S., it probably didn't look good. But again, under the color of law, that use of force is different. Well, let me ask you this, because I've been toying with this idea. Civilians need to learn how to scale force.
Yeah,
I guess is where I'm going with that. And I think this is one of the places that we fail at. Law enforcement officers know all too well there's a use of force continuum. There's a ladder you can go up, and et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think that ever translates to the civilian, when in reality, it probably could and should.
Oh, I think it's exactly the same. In fact, in my concealed carry classes, I talk about it, and there's no reason that the concepts that we applied as law enforcement don't apply equally. Now, there are a couple of things. There's an expectation in law enforcement that I get involved in these things, where in civilian world, the expectation is you avoid them, right? And that's a perfectly acceptable. But when we talk about the point where we no longer have a choice, right? Something's got to happen. Then our force continuum, I really don't see a huge difference in its basic layout. Some of the differences, I knew I had intermediate tools on me, right? My bat belt, right? So I had mace, I had a baton, nowadays tasers, and we don't often have those as a civilian, which goes back to what I said. Everybody wants to solve it with the gun because that's all they have, right? And so if they don't understand de-escalation as a skill, it can be learned, you can get good at it. And then breaking contact, even once the fight starts, nothing says you got to stay there and keep fighting, right? So we can, do a little bit, break contact and run away, which is a great idea. But one of the things about understanding your force continuum is you're less likely to make the wrong choice, the wrong level of force, right? Now, at USCCA, we teach a phrase. We want you to ask yourself, is this worth dying or going to jail over, right? This situation. Right. And what I like about that phrase is it helps you get to an answer quickly, which is always an important. We need to decide quickly what's going on here so that we can make an appropriate decision. And when you say, hey, is this worth me getting arrested over? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then you know what you need to do. Okay. Now, the answer may be yes, it may be worth it to you, that risk, protecting a child or a family member or something like that. But once again, then you get to the decision quickly. And that's part of the problem, is that decision-making process of, there's always a lot of, what do I do? What do I do? Should I, shouldn't I? That always puts us behind the curve. So the sooner we can get to the decision that to take action or break action, if you will, then the better off we're going to be. Even if it's using force, the sooner we get to that, the less likely that it's going to escalate to the point of deadly force, right? So I'm a big fan of educating the decision-making process, and that's scenario-based training is how you go about that. And that doesn't necessarily even have to include a firearm or anything like that. It's just scenario-based. What am I seeing? What is the potentials here, and what are my options?
Yeah, the late William April, he used to be like, hey, when you read the newspaper, put yourself inside that story. Think about how you would handle it and play the what if game. And those are, like I said, you don't have to gun up for that. You can sit there and stare out the damn window. It doesn't matter. And your brain doesn't know the difference between you being in it or not. That's the beautiful thing.
That's the great thing. Yeah, absolutely right. That's another conundrum. You asked the question about, integrating some of the entangled techniques or hands in your CCW classes. It's also those decision making, right? So we have to be very careful when we teach, and always circle back and say, now remember, this is the context of why we're doing this, right? Because we don't just draw a gun and shoot people. So in this context, that's why we use this skill. And I think you could integrate some questions, maybe a scenario that you read in the paper. Hey, I read this the other day. How would you guys handle that? Or do you think it was handled right, or whatever, and get those brains working?
At 100%, because most Americans don't live in that world. As a police officer, as a bouncer, as a guy in combat, whatever. You see those things play out again and again and again and again and again. It's like, so okay, But for that soccer mom, this is the first time, and they will either underreact or overreact.
Yeah.
You know, because they haven't put themselves in those things. So I highly encourage it. Doesn't cost you anything. And the final thing, I like what you said at USCCA. You have that mantra. Attorney Andrew Branca has a mantra. You know, he wrote The Law of Self-Defense. For those that don't know, I highly encourage you to read that book. He's a good friend. And one of the things that he says is, at the end of your 20-year stint in prison, where you walk at those gates and go, thank God I did that. You know,
Yeah.
it was worth every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. No, well, and quite frankly, I mean, I think it's possible that you could be in a situation where you'd go, I'd put 20 years in, right? But
for my granddaughter, buddy, you're absolutely right.
But generally, we don't think that, right? You know,
No.
maybe I could have done that a little bit different, and come out. And I'll be honest. There's been plenty of cases in my life as a kid growing up. I got in a fight with a kid, and I think about it today, and I go, why did I ever do that? You know, what was the value of that? And you know, we have the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, but you don't get that. I mean, violence is ugly, and if you've never experienced it, it's because of its unfamiliarity, it makes it difficult to deal with because you don't know what you're dealing with.
Right. Yeah, and that's a perfect place to leave today, Steve. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find you, find more about United States Concealed Carry Association, or train with you, et cetera? Yeah,
so USCCA.com, of course, is where you go to learn about the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. And if you want to train, take one of our classes, you can look up training and on our calendar there, our training tour. My business is customtacticalservices.com. You can find out a little bit about me there. And, you know, you can reach out through USCCA and contact me there and ask questions. If you need some training, we're happy to bring some training to you. So whatever we can do to assist is great. And I just want to say, God, Rich, I can't tell you how excited I was to have this conversation with you. Because at the training class where we met, it's so limited. I mean, you're spread across all of everybody. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk with you.
Well, I want this to be round one of many more conversations to come, Steve. So thank you for coming on, sir.
Yeah, we got a lot we could talk about. So I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. Guys and gals out there in Warrior Nation, remember the fight is coming. Be ready.
Yeah.